Celestial greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program once again called Looking Up. This is being recorded in December of 2021, and it is about the 2022 astrological outlook. What's new for 2022? And also what's some of the same old stuff? Well, we're going to look at that together today. And it's been quite a long time since I have visited with you here on Looking Up. I hope you didn't forget all about me. And it's been quite a couple of years here with the pandemic. You know, I was the last show taping in the studio in early March of 2020, when they came in and they said, you're going to have to leave the studio in half an hour. And today, Jen told me I could come into the studio. And I said, no, I think I won't. Tomorrow, the mask mandate goes into effect again. So here we are. I'm doing Zoom from home, like my whole world has changed to Zoom from home nowadays. So, you know, we have had this global difficulty, and people wonder, oh, did astrologers see that coming? I mean, I saw trouble coming, but I didn't know just what form it would take. And I had no idea until we got this virus that Pluto is the planet in charge of viruses. And here we had, for over most of 2020 and well into 2021, 5 times when Pluto and that new troublemaker dwarf planet way out past Pluto, named for Mars' sister, Eris, they were in that 90-degree friction position of square. And the last one's finished up in October of 2021. But guess what? They're not really totally over yet. That was the last exact time frame, but we have some more time coming up when they're close enough in 2022 that we're not out of the woods yet. And you know, there is a term, and I don't know what it is, in the Indian astrology called Vedic astrology, for when all the planets are within one half of the zodiac and none are in the other half. And it's considered too intense, that things are too compacted. And that's one of the things we had going on when this pandemic started. And it happens a lot, especially in the winter time frame, winter into spring. And this is because all of the slow planets are in those signs from Capricorn to Taurus. And then when the quick planets are also in those signs, everything's too clustered together. And even they can be spread out in more signs. But, you know, if they spread from Taurus to Scorpio, there's half, you know, or if they spread from Capricorn to Cancer, there's half. So there was also a French astrologer named Barbeau. I think Adrian might have been his first name. He's deceased now. But some years ago, he predicted a worldwide plague similar to the bubonic plague for 2020. And he predicted that from long-term slow cycles between the planets, and things were similar then to how they were now. But at any rate, let's get on with looking at what's happening this year. So what's new for 2022? Here's our astrological outlook. You know, the main thing that a lot of astrologers are talking about, the biggest thing maybe, is Jupiter coming through Pisces this year, and it's going to be together with Neptune. Well, Neptune's been in Pisces. It's a 14-year transit. It started coming in around 2011, 2012, and it's still here till about 2024, 2025. Long time. It's 2/3 the way, just a little more than 2/3 the way through. But you know, with a 12-year orbit, this is the only time Jupiter is coming to see Neptune in its own sign. And back before we had the telescope, Jupiter was the ruling planet of Pisces. So it's considered a really big deal. But I would consider a bigger deal if it was going to be in the retrograde zigzag range of Jupiter, so that it was going to join with Neptune 3 times, but it's only coming once, so I called it a one-hit wonder. And the exact date is the 12th of April, but it's going to be in the neighborhood and close for many days before and after that, including at the full moon at April 16th. So around that full moon is a nice time to use this energy of Jupiter and Neptune. And together they're very good for envisioning what you want and attracting things to you. Also for having a positive outlook or boosting your faith. And, you know, Jupiter, the biggest planet, it enlarges anything it comes into contact with. So coming with Neptune, it's going to enhance the fear factor of Neptune and the faith factor of Neptune. And Neptune's also very related to medications, the medical field, and even self-medicating, which means, you know, street drugs or alcohol, things like that. And Jupiter, when it increases this, it's like, wow, if you're somebody who already has a drinking problem, you better watch out around that full moon in April. And if you're somebody who has difficulties with your immune system, this is perhaps a time when you can boost it and get an increased capability for fighting off illness. And where they're meeting, it's almost 24 degrees of Pisces. It's like 23 degrees and high change, I'd call it. So I want you to remember this degree of 24 because we're going to be coming back to that. Jupiter, I think, from just on its own, it's much more interesting because 3 times it's going to be in the neighborhood of or crossing through the threshold between the end of the zodiac and the beginning of the zodiac. The last degree of the last sign is 29 Pisces. The first degree of the first sign is 0 Aries. And what a vast difference there is between those two energies. Pisces is very selfless, and Aries is very self-first. So you might find when Jupiter, that magnifies things, is passing through these final degrees of Pisces, and that would be here in the May 5 to 10 time frame, coming back October 28th to the 12th of November, and finishing up 12/5 to 12/20. Those could be times when it's difficult to press your own issues, and you find that a lot of things you have to do what other people want you to do. Whereas when it comes into 0 Aries between May 10th and the 15th in the West Coast, 16th touches into a little bit here on the East Coast, October 18th to the 27th, December 20th to the 30th. So all of these dates are within 2020, but the 0 Aries times are forge ahead, do something new. Maybe if you start something new in May and there is an eclipse full moon close to this on 5/16. But if you're starting something new in one of these time frames, or even the first one, maybe you're adjusting it in the second and the third one. Now, 0 Aries is the degree where the sun goes through every spring equinox. And so it has that idea of renewal, starting over, fresh, turn the page, start a new chapter. And because it's one of the 4 degrees where the sun goes through it at the equinoxes and solstices, and those are things everybody experiences together. So those are degrees that connect people far and wide. And I call them the degrees of the movers and shakers and newsmakers and those who rub elbows with them. So if you want to try to launch a new business, a product, a book, something like that, when you want to have popularity for it, this time frame is good in general. Now, within that time frame, there's going to be certain hours you have to avoid because the moon's in that go nowhere condition called void of course, which you can look on cathyastrology.com and find that out, or in an astrology calendar or ephemeris. But always starting before a full moon is better than after. So we've got some days leading up to a full moon here in May to get things going. So, you know, originally, well, still, Aries is a sign of competition, combativeness. So there may be increased international friction while Jupiter, the international planet, is at 0 Aries. Now we have another important zero. And do you remember 2 years ago, at the end of 2020, Jupiter passed Saturn? I'm sorry, 1 year ago. And they looked like they fused into one object. And that was when they entered Aquarius at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And I felt like, oh, that's really the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And they started a new 20-year cycle, which they meet every 20 years. But they also started a new cycle of more than 100 years, when every time they're meeting now, it's going to be in the air signs, the signs of connecting people and communication and information and even technology. And it's interesting because Venus and Mars are getting together in 2022 two times, but the important one from this standpoint is the second time on March 6th, 7th in there, and that's at 0 Aquarius. So it comes back to this same idea of starting things that join all people together, that have a new technological side to them, or a humanitarian side to them. And actually, Venus and Mars are traveling like a little duo, which is very good for relationships and maybe even peace, between the 12th of February and the 12th of March. So that includes their first combination very close to Valentine's Day on the 16th. The other really big thing that's going on this year is Saturn and Uranus in that 90-degree friction connection. They did it 3 times exactly in 2021, 17th of February, 14th of June, 24th of December. But they will come back to within 1 degree of that 90 degrees perfect square in the fall of 2022, between September 15th and the 24th of October. And astrologers who study the financial side of things from an astrological standpoint have noted that most of America's crashes, panics, downturns, depressions have had some kind of conflicting connection called an aspect between Saturn and Uranus. So we may find that that's happening again. I kind of half expected it in 2021, but we're not out of those woods yet in 2022. Now, Saturn is in the sign that Uranus rules. It's in Aquarius. And that might mean that it's acting a little less stodgy and locked into traditional ways and the status quo and the established ways of doing things. And Uranus, of course, wants to be the risk-taking influence, but it's going through Taurus, and Taurus doesn't like change, and it's a planet of change. So maybe this particular square between Saturn and Uranus is not going to be as bad as some of the astrologers have been worrying about. But when they come into that square again in 2022, in the fall, I noticed that Venus, the ruler there of Taurus, where Uranus is, it's going to be making difficult connections with those two, Saturn and Uranus, around October 1st, 2nd, and around November 5th to the 7th. So we might see a lot of market volatility throughout that period of mid-September into latter part of October, but especially around these dates. And also Jupiter, again, that magnifies things, is making a harsh aspect semi-square. It's halfway between Saturn and Uranus, half square to each. And that is in the time frame of the fall equinox, around the 21st. The exact dates are 21st and 28th. So do take a look at your financial picture. Your numbers are probably all up because it was a real bull market in 2021. Surprise, but that may not last all the way through 2022, and maybe you'll want to make some adjustments before the autumn kicks in. Now, remember I told you 24 is pretty important degree. Actually, I noticed 24 to 26, so much was happening at that degree, it wasn't even funny. So we have Venus just before the year ended in 2021, turned retrograde, started heading backwards at 26 of Capricorn. Mercury will be backwards in January. It finishes on the 3rd of February at 24 Capricorn. We have the lunar eclipse I alluded to earlier on the 16th of May at 25 Scorpio. Mercury direct the 3rd of June, 26 Taurus. Saturn retrograde the next day, 25 Aquarius. Now, this is kind of bringing in that same flavor of Taurus and Aquarius, which are square to each other, both emphasized at the same time. That might also be a kind of volatile time in the markets, and not a good time for starting something new, and not a time to get married. Okay, Neptune turns retrograde 28th of June at 25 Pisces. Mercury direct the 2nd of October, 24 Virgo. Look at this. It's really what's happening is every 4 months, the 3rd of February, 24 of an earth sign, Capricorn. 4 months later, 3rd of June at 26 Taurus, an earth sign. 4 months later, 2nd of October, 24 Virgo, another earth sign. In fact, all of the Mercury retrogrades this year, they march into an air sign, turn tail, and march back into an earth sign. We have Pluto turning direct October 8th, 26 Capricorn. Mars turning retrograde 30th of October, 25.5 Gemini. And Mercury turning retrograde for a 4th time in 2022 at 24 Capricorn on the 29th of December. So guess what? If you have anything, but especially several things in your chart at 24, 25, 26, whatever sign, especially these signs, but whatever sign, that thing is going to get hit over and over and over again. And it's knocking on your door to do something with the energy of what that planet represents. 24 degrees is also where slow Eris, that dwarf planet that's the troublemaker, has been kind of like stuck like a needle on a record for years. Well, it goes through Aries for over a century, but it's, it takes many years to get past a particular degree. And so Pluto came into 24 Capricorn, and that's when it made this square with Eris 5 times. 3 in 2020, 2 in 2021, and I noticed that they somewhat correlated with some of the peaks of these waves of COVID. So then the other thing that's interesting with Mercury and Venus. Okay, Venus, the highest degree it gets up to in Capricorn is 26. Mercury starts going up from 24 Capricorn. So that little slice between 24 and 26 of Capricorn, both Mercury and Venus are going through that. And each of them hits Pluto 3 times over the course of basically a couple months or more, especially in the case of Venus. And the big one here is as Venus hits Pluto the 3rd time, Mars comes through Capricorn then and joins them. And I think that might be, I don't know what exactly, but when we talk about Pluto meaning joint collective matters, and that has to do with finances and banking, and maybe something about inflation at that time will cause the Fed to either hold or raise the interest rates or something like that. It probably could have effect on the markets. I mean, Congress was trying to pass a big bill that would affect how the rich are taxed and how the poor are helped. That got shelved, but it may be back in March, who knows? And Venus is also doing the 3 times, making that 90 degrees, like Pluto was, to Eris. This is not helpful for relationships. This is very difficult for relationships because people who are trying to work through their differences, this just shakes them up and makes us dig under the surface and see what's really, the motivating factors between things. And Eris, boy, in mythology, she just liked to see people fight. She didn't care what side they were on. She is just pro fight, fight, fight. So watch out, lovers. There are some other times in the year that I pegged that weren't so great for relationships. This is somewhat of an unusual year because the quick planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and I now include dwarf planet Ceres, which is one of the largest bodies out in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. all four of them are going to have a retrograde cycle or part of one during 2022. So I thought, oh, how often does this happen? So I look back, and over the past 10 years, it happened 4 times. So it's not that rare. And most years, I think I mentioned, Mercury just has 3 retrograde cycles. There's a partial of a 4th in 2022. And in January, Venus is retrograde almost all the time that Mercury is. And this happens some years, but we went from 2000 to 2016 without such an incidence. And then we ended up with one since 2017. It's happened 9 times out of 14 years. Crazy. But you know, when all these planets are retrograde at once or in the same year, it just says there's lots of things we have to go back and look at and do over and over again, or review and redo. And like I mentioned, there's little slices where certain things are happening multiple times between these different quick planets. This is the zodiac wheel, the way we usually represent it, starting at Aries at the 9 o'clock position. And here's Capricorn, where I said Venus is going to be in retrograde December and January, even into, I think, early February maybe. And Mercury is retrograde mostly in January into February. And see, here's the little slice where they overlap. And next winter, starting on the 29th of December, when Mercury goes retrograde in Capricorn, it's traveling the same group of degrees practically that Venus is this year. So if something doesn't work out right for you this year, you're going to get a chance a year from now to do it over again. And that could be with relationships or finances or something about your possessions or something aesthetic. Now here in Gemini, also very interesting, because we have Ceres from 21 into 22 was retrograde over a big swath of Gemini. And Mercury in the spring of 2022 comes in and covers most of those same degrees. But remember how I told you it starts, the higher point in the retrograde is in the early part of an air sign Gemini and goes back into the late part of Taurus and Earth sign. And then later in 2022, Mars is going to go retrograde for a long time, and it covers more than half of Gemini. So there's little pieces of Gemini that have a multiple visit from quick planet retrogrades here in the year. And we even have the next Ceres retrograde will be in Libra, and that'll happen in 2023 primarily. But there's like preview of coming attractions, because this fall of 2022, Mercury will be retrograde between the late Virgo and early Libra. Same threshold between Virgo and Libra that Ceres will cross. Well, now Libra is the relationship sign, and Virgo is a working and helping kind of sign. So you may find that you have to do more work on your relationship, things like that. Okay, so we said, yes, Mars, 7 months in Gemini altogether from August 20th to March 25th. The retrograde itself is the 30th of October to the 12th of January 23, and covers more than half that sign. The big thing it's doing is 3 times it's going to be in that friction with Neptune, which means we're confused about what to do. Neptune is question marks and Mars is action. So we may slow down and think 3 times before we do something. And here's where it's got those 4 degrees between 8 and 12 of Gemini that I was showing you that Ceres was there, and finishes up in mid-January of 2022. And if we take into account the time frames when a planet's moving forward through that degree range it's going to retrograde back over, then we find that the whole time frame kind of extends out. We'll be going up through the spring equinox of 2022. And when a factor is in place at an equinox or a solstice, it affects that whole season that follows that beginning point. Now, another big thing going on in 2022, and this happens about every 18 months or so, the moon's nodes will change signs. Now, what are the moon's nodes? They are not bumps on the lunar surface. They are the intersection points between the 2 most important orbits Earth going around the sun, moon going around the earth. And those intersections are kind of the target point for where eclipses happen within half a sign of those. The closer, usually the stronger the eclipse, or the more exact. And they're always in the opposite degrees of opposite signs. So when the moon's nodes were going through Gemini and Sagittarius for the past year and a half, that's where we were having most of our eclipses. And now they're going to shift into Taurus and Scorpio. And we'll talk about what that means in a moment. But speaking of mean, there's two ways to measure them. One kind of oscillates a little bit, called the true node, goes back and forth, retrograde and direct. The mean is just always retrograde, it's an average. So the sign change happens December 22nd of 2021 if you're using the average method. And if you're using the precise or exact method, I guess, January 18th of 2022. And you can see in either method, they're lasting into July of 2023, which guess what? That is about 18 months. So when they were in Gemini and Sagittarius, this was a time frame where a lot of attention was on communication and long distance communication. Things like satellites. We had some space launches of, humans, regular humans, not even astronauts, going up into space. I mean, Sagittarius rules long distance travel. That's pretty long distance travel. Actually, I think Aquarius and Uranus are for airplanes and real air travel, but also legal matters come under Sagittarius. Education matters, very strong. Oh, we've had a lot of controversy about, what to teach in the schools or what not to teach in the schools. And here, when these two intersections move into, and they always go backwards through the zodiac, shifting into Taurus and Scorpio, we find that much more emphasis on values and on financial matters and on who has what, or who's controlling the money, things like that. So we'll see where that goes. And this will be in place during the midterm elections in 2022. So during this time when the North Node, which is sort of the direction we're supposed to head in for our growth, is going through Taurus, it's going to pass Uranus, which is slowly going through Taurus. And that's in the latter part of July, depending again on which node measurement you use, but either the 26th or the 31st. And either one of them is close enough to that new moon on the 28th of July. So I would say that's when we're going to feel it, and even in the 4 weeks following it, because like what happens with a season change, if something occurs on a new moon, that energy carries through for the rest of the lunar cycle. And Venus and Sun will get together on the 22nd of October. Well, this has actually nothing to do with the nodes, but ended up on this slide. Okay, so what's interesting about this is it starts a whole new cycle of about 150 years where there will be Venus-Sun conjunctions or join-ups in Libra. That hasn't happened in a long time, and it's been in Scorpio, and it's working its way backwards. So if you'd like to know more about something like that, there's a great book called Venus Star Point by Ariel Gutman, and she goes into what this means. But I think it has a lot to do about relationships as well as justice and fairness, which Venus is about that anyway, but Libra is the sign of that, ruled by Venus. So another time I'd like you to just watch out for is when Mars and Uranus have conflict, and that is usually accident potential, klutziness. And we have January 18th, March 22nd, that brings in the whole spring, May 26th, August 1st. And finally, volatility and unpredictability when Jupiter is making abrasive connections with Uranus around May 11th, 28th of September, 23rd of December. And the new moon on the 23rd of December has Jupiter at that 0 Aries, and Uranus halfway in the middle of Taurus is a square and a half from 0 Aries. This is probably going to be where a year from now, Christmas time, people are possibly very much in the middle of financial hurting if things go wiggy with the market. So I just want to tell you, I did day ratings for 2022, the whole year. I did rate the days 1 through 5. 5's the best. There are very few. And those along with the retrograde bar chart that I call On a Page are free downloads. You can get them in the astrologybooth.com. And there's a tab that says free resources for the year. So I'm sure I am running long on my time here. And it sure has been fun to be back on Looking Up again. And hopefully I'll do some more shows during 2022 and tell you more about things like the different new and full moons, because there's always a lot going on when you're looking up.